Hey guys, it's Nicole with Patterns for Pirates. I'm going to do a really quick video on how to do the burrito roll. This is for a lined tank bodice, and it is in our knit boundless dress for both women and girls. I've already sewn together my lining and my bodice at the shoulder seams. On the boundless pattern, the front and back bodice are the same. So once you sew this all together, you can kind of pick which you want as your front, as your back, or your lining. I'm using a different color lining than from my main, just so that it makes it a little bit easier in the video to tell what's the main versus the lining. So again, I've already sewn together front and back bodice at the shoulder seams using a 1/2 inch seam allowance for both my main fabric and my lining. I'm going to place them right sides together. So I have my lining piece right side facing up, and then my main is going to go right side facing down. We're going to align them at the shoulder seam and all along the neckline. I usually don't pin this, but you can pin or clip along the neckline so that all of the raw edges are lined up. But I'm just going to go straight onto the serger with this. We're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you use anything smaller, let's just say you wanted to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the neckline, you can. Just keep in mind that it's going to raise that neckline by another 1/4 inch. The women's, you can kind of get away with that and still be able to pull it over the head. But on the youth, anytime you get any smaller on the neckline, then you risk the chance of not being able to put it over their heads, since on a lot of the baby sizes or the children sizes, their heads are a lot bigger than their necklines. So just keep in mind that when you do your seam allowance. So here we are serging the necklines together. Make sure you move all your other fabric out of the way so you don't catch your bodice. The only thing we're serging here again is the neckline. Make sure that you do not stretch your fabric as you serge or you sew. Otherwise, you'll end up with a wonky, stretched out neckline. And that is not pretty looking. Okay, so we have serged. Let me get this little thread off here. Together the neckline of the bodice, again right sides together, main and lining. We're going to take the main fabric and turn your bodice right sides out. And then you can go ahead and press this neckline if you want to right now. Or you can wait till after you do the arm side. I usually wait just because it's one less step to kind of go back and forth from your machine to the iron. So what we're going to do here is we're going to lay the bodice right side up, and your lining is going to be right side facing down. And this is what the actual burrito method is in the tutorial. And we are going to be serging your arm side so that all of your seams are enclosed. And in order to do that, this is kind of the method that we chose. So lay your bodice right side up. Again, you've already sewn together the neckline of the bodice, and we are going to start on one side. I usually do it on the side closest to myself and then roll away. And we're going to do what we said, like the burrito method. So you're just going to roll your fabric all the way up to the opposite side, just like you would a burrito. And you'll see that I have my lining here, my main fabric is there, and my lining is underneath. Same thing on the other side. So what we're going to do is take the lining and we're going to flip it underneath and over. And then once we flip this over, it'll match right sides together. So your lining and your bodice. So again, once you've rolled your fabric all the way to the opposite side, you're going to separate, pull your lining away from your main, flip it underneath and over to then match right sides together of your lining and your bodice on the side seam. Come over to the opposite side and do the same thing. So again, pull your lining away from your bodice, or your main, excuse me. Flip it underneath and over, aligning the raw edges. So then once you grab it here at the kind of the arm side, give it a little bit of a shake. The entire bodice is now rolled up inside those two main layers. And then your strap here, same thing, is tucked in between your lining and your main. And then you can pin here to hold them together. And then this is where we're going to sew or serge along the arm side. Again, we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you get to this little shoulder seam area, you want to make sure that you kind of feel in there that that strap is tucked in and out of the way, because if you would have happened to catch that when you sew or serge, when you go to flip the bodice right side out, you won't be able to, because it's going to be stuck in between those two layers. Again, do not stretch out your fabric as you serge. So here I kind of just make sure, kind of just grabbing here, that that strap is tucked in and out of the way. So as I sew, I don't catch it. And we are serging all along that arm side. So it has been sewn together. Now what we do is we open up this bodice, and inside is our strap from the other end, and you'll just grab it, kind of give it a little bit of a tug. And what we're doing is we're pulling the bodice from the opposite side through the strap piece. And I'll just give it a little bit of a work here. Gently pull on it, because of course you don't want to pull out or snap any of the threads that you just sewed. So now our arm side on that side is sewn. Our neckline is sewn, so all of these seams are enclosed. Now we're going to repeat the process on the opposite side, the side that we haven't sewn, doing the exact same thing. Again, lay your bodice right side up. We're going to start at the end closest to you, roll it toward the opposite side seam, pull your bodice lining away from your main, flip it down and around and over, lining up at the armpit. Same thing on the opposite end. So now your strap that you have just sewn should be tucked inside in between those two layers. Again, line them up at the shoulder seam. I just pin it here. You can pin all along this arm side, but I find it easier sometimes, especially on the youth, that you don't need so many pins. And again, sew or serge along arm side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Making sure that strap is tucked in there so you don't catch it as you sew in between those shoulder seams here. And we're going to continue all the way down. And keep going. There we go. Okay. So now your other arm side is sewn. Same thing. Pull your bodices apart. Grab that strap that's tucked inside. Give it a little bit of a pull. And we're going to pull this out here. There we go. Try to give it a little bit of a tug. And now you should have a neckline that is sewn all together. Your seam is enclosed. Your arm side on both sides. And then now all you have is your side seams. So do just like you would normally any other bodice. You'll take your side seams, place them right sides together, and sew. So what I like to do is just pull your lining and your bodice away from each other, or your main, excuse me. And you'll grab them here, line them up at the armpit. So they should match up at the bottom edge, which is where you would attach your skirt. Here along that seam, and then this side seam of the bodice. So when you lay it down, it basically looks like your rectangle. Inside, underneath here, in between those two layers are both your straps. And we'll sew these together, again, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And repeat on the opposite side. Lining to lining, right sides together, main to main, right sides together, aligning at the bottom right edge, armpit, and along this side. Okay, so now you'll flip it back, right sides out. And you'll have a fully enclosed bodice sewn along the neckline, arm side, and then your side seams are all enclosed. And there you have it. Then you'll take the next step, add your skirt, and you're all set.